Okay, thank you. Call to order the water supply meeting for July 5th, 2023 at 3:08. Roll call, please.
Okay, Director Oglesby as the alternate. Chair Edwards
Here.
and Director Paul will be joining us shortly if she's not already.
Okay, Jim, what we got for the agenda? We got
Right.
action.
So I'm going to screen share very quickly here because the posted agenda was actually an early draft. So this is what the agenda should look like, which is item 1 is the same, which is consider adoption of the minutes. Item 2 is an update on Pure Water Monterey. Item 3 is source waters for Pure Water Monterey. My suggestion is that we put that, and I'm sure there are a couple people who are in the attendees list who probably are on just for that, but I think we're going to delay this because I was unable to schedule the meeting I needed with Monterey One Water, who's kind of the keeper of all the information on source waters. We are going to do the review of the ASR season performance and some discussion of the PUC expansion proceedings that Fran can help us out with. So that's what this will look like.
Okay, and since we have public, I'm going to open it up to public comment. Sarah, could you open it up for public comment?
Yes, if you wish to speak under public comment, please use your raised hand icon. And state your name if you wish for the record. Chair Edwards, I see no raised hands.
Okay, we'll continue on with the agenda. Public comment is closed. First action item to approve the minutes from the last meeting. I move approval.
Second.
Second, any comments from the public on the minutes?
I see no raised hands.
Okay, let's do a roll call vote.
Director Oglesby,
Aye.
Director Paul. Director Paul's not joined us yet. Chair Edwards.
Aye.
Minutes are adopted 2-0.
All right. General Manager, we're in the discussion items now. What is the first one you'd like to discuss?
Right, so discussion item, item number 2 is an update on the Pure Water Monterey project. We just closed out the fiscal year on the base project. The base project requiring the delivery of 3,500 acre feet per year. We to California American Water, we satisfied that delivery requirement 2 months ago. And we booked the remaining 2 months of May and June into the operating reserve. And the operating reserve now sits at about 1,870 acre feet, about 120 acre feet beyond the requirement that we need to achieve by September 1st. So we're ahead of the game. We'll make a decision whether to just keep that water during the expansion to increase the operating reserve on the district's books, or if there's a need, we may designate it as company water to be delivered at some month or over a couple of months if needed during the next fiscal year. So that was a success. On the expansion, bids are expected in. Maureen, do you have a date on when they're expected in? Sorry to put you on the spot.
Have already been opened.
They've been opened, okay.
They've been open. Both bids came in under the engineer's estimate. And they're reviewing the bids now to make sure they have a sound basis to move forward.
And there will be a recommendation for award at Monterey One Water's July 31st board meeting. So stay tuned. But it's not, it's good to know that the bids are reasonably within the parameters that we expected, because it's been an unexpected increase in construction costs and supply chain issues and so forth. So this is a positive signal that at least over the course of 5 months of final costing and actual bid receipt, that the numbers are somewhat close. So that's good. That's great. And
Yeah.
that's it. That's all we have to report unless there's questions.
One question I probably have on ASR, is anything else that we can suggest to Cal-Am to improve the season for next year? I'm hearing rumors out there it could be raining just as much like this year, next year, well, within our next water season.
Yep. So I think we're heading into item 3 under discussion. So let's do that. I'm going to screen share a PowerPoint. And I think what we'll find is the lessons learned for this past ASR season are going to be applicable to next year. And we'll just talk about that in a second. So let me screen share.
Okay, let's make a note that Director Paul has joined the meeting.
All right.
Sorry, everybody, for
It's
that
all right.
delay.
Okay, so everybody can see the presentation, I hope.
Yes,
So just to revisit, what are the constraints we face on ASR injection? Our permits, the maximum you could do is about 29 acre-feet per day, and that's off of the 2 permits, 2808A and 2808C. And that would only happen in the wettest of wettest periods. But the wells themselves, the injection wells themselves, with their age and with their performance, really couldn't do 29 acre-feet per day. So under the presumption that we had access to the Monterey pipeline, which we do not, our permits would allow the 29 acre-feet per day, but the actual capacity of the injection wells with the Monterey pipeline as the source could do 26 acre-feet per day. We don't really, or we haven't really had access to the Monterey pipeline the last several years, and there doesn't seem to be an intent going forward to figure out operations where you could use it going south to north in the winter for ASR deliveries, and then north to south in the shoulder and summer months for water deliveries from Pure Water Monterey, ASR withdrawals, eventually desal, et cetera, et cetera. So we're stuck using the Segunda pipeline through the Crest tank, coming up through Tehama and down through Montera. And that would limit the injection capacity with all 4 wells available at 19 acre-feet per day. But recently we connected the Ryan Ranch and Bishop, we didn't, Cal-Am connected the Ryan Ranch and Bishop systems to the main system with district approval. And yeah, that kind of limits then that directional for ASR to about 18 acre-feet per day. So 18 acre-feet per day is kind of the number to hold on to in your mind for no constraints on the injection field up here in the Seaside Basin. What we've been experiencing is there's a lack of redundancy or additional capacity for withdrawals of water in the Seaside Basin that can connect to the Monterey pipeline for deliveries south. And so ASR 3, which is of course a couplet plumbed together with ASR well number 4, ASR 3 has been used for extraction throughout the winter. And that means you can't inject in ASR 3, and because it's plumbed together with ASR 4, you can also not inject in ASR 4. That creates a limit on the Seaside injection side of 13 acre-feet per day. And then when bad things happen in the Carmel Valley, there's Carmel Valley constraints. If certain wells go offline and there's concern about meeting demand in Carmel Valley or keeping tanks at levels to produce, secure fire flows. When there were no pump stations, the two new Carmel Valley pump station and Forest Lake pump station could move water up the hill during this ASR season. Those two were not available. So if Upper Valley wells or Lower Valley wells are not available and the pump stations were not available to push water up the valley to accommodate, then you have the Carmel Valley constraints kick in, which can then drop it even more. And we saw all of this during the course of the ASR season. So this is what the season looks like in review. We had some terrific rains, and the Los Padres dam, the reservoirs filled and the dam spilled in early December. And you can see there was very little first day and a little bit second day. Our limit would have been about 13 acre feet per day. If we actually had ASR 3 and 4 available, our limit would be 18. So those were the two numbers you saw from the last. But that went on only for about a week. And then the in-stream flow requirements cannot be met. What I mean by that is the rains that happened here produced enough flow, but it didn't really saturate the watershed. And so it didn't keep the flows up, and the flows dropped back below our permit conditions. And so we shut everything down and we went. And then on New Year's Eve began, all rain breaking loose. And that's when the season really began. And you can see the blue bars are the amount of injection every day. The 13 acre feet is the rough expectation of what we could have injected in ASR wells number 1 and 2 without 3 and 4 available. And then again, this is the 18 that we could have done if ASR well 3 and 4 were available instead of being used in production. So what you see are these gaps, little gap here, a period through here, and so forth. And then we had a really nice finish to the whole season where we went, more than, basically 2 months of really good injection. And then we had a period here where it looked really good. So you got a question, what happened during these times? And they're not all the same issue, but looking at it, we had a couple startup hiccups, which just means, you got to be ready. And we weren't completely ready on the very first days in December. And then when the flows came back, we kind of ramped up over a few days before we were getting close to that theoretical max. Then, of course, we had the flooding in the upper river area, and the Paso Hondo neighborhood near the De Dampier fields up in the Carmel Valley actually flooded. And when the river itself floods its banks, that makes certain production wells near the river susceptible. And so there were a number of production wells that were turned off due to flooding. And then to turn them back on, you got to blow them out so the waters need to recede past the point of where you backflush. And you also have to satisfy water quality concerns. Any traces of bacteria or other fouling need to be eliminated. Then we hit a period where the Pierce well was struggling at first, and then it went out completely. And that, I believe, is the largest production well in the lower Carmel Valley. Maureen, weigh in if I'm wrong. The AT&T Gulf was the first week of of February. And Schulte well had been out during this period anyway, which is also a Carmel Valley well. So as a well goes out, demand goes up, and there's no redundancy. Here was a period where Cal-Am needed to look at tank levels and serving demand ahead of taking water to move for ASR. Then we hit a period, actually right in here, you may recall there was a 2-week period where the new pump stations at Forest Lake and Carmel Valley were tested and then utilized to move water up the valley. That reversal of flow, however, very likely was the cause of multiple pipe breaks and leaks in the distribution system, which kind of came home to roost in this period of time as the company identified leaks, repaired leaks, and then brought the system back into balance. Well, when you're fixing leaks and you've lost a major production well and you don't have redundancy from another well, it got a little precarious out there. And trying to identify leaks when the roads are still wet with rainwater from the rain events is also, troubling. So there was a period of time where these leaks, as I said, most likely a result of running the system in reverse and pushing water in an opposite direction from the way the distribution system was used to, probably created a number of these large leaks in the Carmel, Pebble Beach area. Then we had a short period of time where the Berwick well number 8 was problematic right in here this weekend and this weekend, and Pierce was still out and Schulte was still out. But then everything came back into balance here towards the end of April and ran clearly through the end of May. So that's your season in review. But let's talk a little bit about what that meant. Well, the flooding of the Upper Carmel Valley wells, if we didn't have that, so there weren't those constraints, if we were able to get the 13 acre-feet in, we would have, well, we basically lost 97 acre-feet of injection. And then over on the Seaside side, if we had ASR 3 and 4 available during that period, we would have gotten another 70 acre-feet for a total of 167. With that period where Pierce was out, AT&T Golf was in town, and Schulte was out, so lack of redundancy, we lost 53 against our injection constraint and 65 against not having ASR 3 and 4. That period where there were some leaks of concern and the quote unquote filling of tanks, which is kind of a combination of bringing everything back, the system to stable. We lost 109 acre-feet against our actual capacity and 155 acre-feet if we had the additional capacity that we lacked at ASR 3 and 4. And then that short period of time with Berwick number 8, another 45 lost and 50 lost, total of 95. And then other are just things like those startup days, which weren't very many. And then other days just kind of here and there that don't really fall into these periods. Lost 88 acre-feet. And then here, this is such a big number because in effect, you're saying if we had no constraints the entire season, except for what we know about, what could we have gotten? And that's a 440 acre-feet. So at the end of the day, we lost about 392 if there were no Carmel Valley constraints. We lost another 780 if there were no injection constraints in the injection field. And meaning we had about 1,100, 1,200 acre-feet more that could have been captured if everything worked out. And that's not with the Monterey pipeline, but that's basically recognizing that beginning December 31st, if we didn't have the problems in Carmel Valley and at ASR 3 and 4, that's what we could have achieved, in addition to what we did achieve. So what could have prevented the constraints? That's not actually the title of this chart. That's the title of the next chart. I apologize. But what we did find is that even with the Carmel Valley constraints, we had enough days where we were maxing out our 13 acre-feet injection. That's basically this period of February through March. and then April through the end of May, which were 66 days where we didn't have any Carmel Valley constraints. We still had ASR 3 and 4 as a constraint. So if we didn't have ASR 3 and 4 as a constraint, those days we would have gotten an extra 5 acre-feet or 330 additional acre-feet. So even with the Carmel Valley constraints and that spotty operation that we were able to get water over the hill, if we had ASR 3 and 4, we would have had an additional 350. So the coulda, woulda, shoulda on all of this is we actually injected 1656. This would have been 1986 without the constraint at ASR 3 and 4, but with the Carmel Valley constraints that we had to live with. Reversing that, if we had no Carmel Valley constraints, but had to live with the ASR 3 and 4, we would have gotten to about 2028. And with neither constraint, so this is what we could have done, left out the acre-feet, but we could have done about 2808 acre-feet of injection. And that would have meant that this would have been the best injection year ever. 2017 was 2,345 acre-feet. So something is amiss here. Oh, ignore these bottom two lines. I was in a hurry about an hour ago getting this last slide in here, and this is the leftover from a previous chart. So this is the number to look at right there. That's what we could have done.
Okay.
And Sarah, make a note. I'm going to send you a revised version to put up on the website.
Yeah, because that bottom number is supposed to be 2023, right?
That's not even supposed to exist. Just to
Okay.
put a big cross out on those two. This is the big number, and that's, you know, if there were no constraints anywhere. But you know, in some respects, it's a shame because some of the constraints probably could have been avoided. The startup hiccups, you know, that's just to be ready earlier. You know, I can tell you the early December rain, so like second week of December, we'd been in great communication with CalAm, good communication with our team. Everyone said we were ready. When it was really time to be ready, I would say most of the day was lost getting the valves set and everything. So being ready and actually getting out there and, you know, moving valves and so forth, you know, a day of injection was basically lost. And also when December 31st came and the rains now and the flows were pretty much permanent throughout the year, we ramped up a little cautiously. And I think we need to, you know, we need to figure out how to go from 0 to 60 in 3 seconds instead of 3 days kind of thing. So this is just, but you only lose a little bit in the overall. This was not a big constraint, so I wouldn't get all worried about it, but we could do better. The flooded upper Carmel Valley wells, well, you know, the way to deal with that was more redundancy on the lower wells, but Schulte was out to begin with, and then Pierce went out. These new pump stations, you know, there were reports to the PUC of when they would be used and useful and ready to go, and they weren't. The Carmel Valley pump station was ready, but the Forest Lake Tanks pump station was not on its original schedule. And you couldn't use you couldn't use the Carmel Valley pump station unless you had water pushed up to it from the Forest Lake. So those two in conjunction should have been ready earlier. And honestly, shouldn't have been tested in the middle of winter. They should have been tested in like a late summer season, early fall, when demands are lower and you're not trying to inject ASR water. It would have been the perfect time, because if you're going to result in having increased leaks that need to be repaired, you know, that's the time to do it. Finding leaks are easier when it's not raining. So anyway, these The losses to ASR as a result of the flooded wells could have been prevented with more redundancy and having the pump stations workable sooner. The Pierce well going out, there's a replacement on Schulte that there's been money for, they've been working on, but it just didn't happen, and it actually may not finally come online until September of this year. There's an approved new Rancho Cañada well that got approval quite some time ago from the PUC. It's just not been a priority and is not underway. And I already mentioned the issue with the pump stations. You know, this would have been perfect to test those in October, not in February. The leaks in the filling of the tanks, well, I just mentioned that. Testing in the off season, you wouldn't have to have dealt with that issue in the middle of the ASR season. And then ASR 3 being used as a production well and the 3 and 4 not being available for injection. You know, the need for redundancy has been known since 2017. It's been talked about, could have been in a rate case. Anyway, the extraction wells 1 and 2 for the expansion were the first 2 to satisfy that new need, and they were just being paired with the expansion if the expansion should move forward. But it was really known that they needed redundant production capacity, even if the expansion never moved forward. So that's just a case of things could have gotten built sooner than they did. And I think now that we're looking at next year, it's time to get on it. You know, it's time to get the Schulte replacement well online. It'd be great to see the new Rancho Cañada well begin construction. We'd be very pleased to know that the extraction wells 1 and 2 are going to be built and ready halfway through the construction schedule, and maybe in 1 year, rather than dragging on for possibly 1, maybe even 2 more injection cycles. So it all relates to the need for redundancy that would take a lot of that Carmel Valley constraint away and the injection constraint. And that is it.
Okay. Any questions from the board? Committee? Go ahead, Karen.
I just want to thank you, Dave, for doing that. And it was probably very hard to find the time, but it's very, and you had explained the constraints to the board before. So some of that was review, but some of it was making the information, the whole picture even more, even clearer for me. And I'm sure there'll be other situations where we want to be able to explain this, and we can use that. It's very helpful. It tells a story also of how you pointed out how some of these constraints could have and should have probably been were preventable. So hopefully, I mean, we can learn from that. One hopes Cal-Am will learn from it. We'll see. And I was just wondering if we have dry years, if we have a couple more dry years, or if even more importantly, if we have wet years, will we be able to get closer to the maximum capacity?
And that's my hope. I don't think we're going to be able to get past the 18 acre feet, because we're going to more than likely be stuck coming up through the Segunda pipeline and the Crest reservoir. But it points out, and this isn't the first time, but it does underscore, fragile is the wrong word, but there's not enough robustness to the Cal-Am system. I think we're even seeing it as we're trying to prepare the emergency response plan for Pure Water Monterey, that there's a reason for redundancy, and there's a reason for having well capacity, in the Carmel Valley, but also up in the Seaside Basin. And it's just, I think when it's dry and you think next year's going to be dry and the next year's going to be dry, maybe you don't think that ASR is important. And so you lose the motivation. Then we see the rain and, you go, why didn't we do that? And I think from the standpoint of the system as a whole, when you just look at its overall robustness, whether it's ASR or not, there needs to be just a little more redundancy in their system as a water purveyor. And I think they know that and they're heading in that direction. But then you have the other piece of, let's get motivated, let's build it, let's get these things done. So we'll see. But it's these are pretty easy lessons.
Director Oglesby, any comments?
No, I thought it was a well-done report update, and I agree with the last couple of statements that Dave made as relates to redundancy. But I think, at a certain level, the board or this committee has to have some type of policy or some type of advocacy towards Cal-Am or towards our ability to push for that redundancy, because it doesn't make sense to go year after year and say we could have, we should have, and then we missed the opportunity. But I like the way that he laid out, the general manager laid out some of the complications in this startup. And hopefully some of we won't have to worry about happening again, but I appreciate him telling us where they were and laying it out for us.
And a few comments from me on this, and then we'll open up to the public on the first two items. Is it a way that we can test the system? I always say this, I'm trying to get out of it, but I don't want people to feel like I'm trying to be the general manager when I say, are we ready? Can Cal-Am run water through the system to the Seaside Basin to make sure that we don't have any leaks, to make sure that all the valves are working? I hear that, and then I hear we got blanks 3 or 4 or 5 days when we start up. We're not taking this stuff serious enough. One side ain't, and I hope we are documenting that. I heard the general manager on several occasions talking about we need the redundancy in these well systems. I hope we are documenting that so we can take to the PUC. You're approving stuff, they got the right to spend the money, but they're not billing. So I hope we just not sitting on our hands, not trying to aggravate Cal-Am when they need to be aggravated, because I believe when we're ready, that river is flowing every day. We accomplishment. Wells 3 and 4 in the Seaside Basin, excuse me, should have been took in. Hey, show me something. Start building it. And if they're not building it, we need to document it. Put it on documentation.
Yeah, I think you just hit on the issue. These are more the Cal-Am workers on the ground with feet on the ground who our guys interact with. They're great. Start up and getting valves working. If you lose 6 to 12 hours because of guys on the ground, it's not really their fault. They're really good, and we work very well together. But the management level decisions about what capital assets do we need and when do we need them, which are things we don't control as the district, except being the shrew that I am sometimes and banging away and saying, hey, come on, man, where's the well? Or hopefully for the expansion project, show me that we have wells 1 and 2 ready before the project's putting out water. These are management level decisions that we've just got to see a different set of priorities, because they've been asked for, but they're not built. And then you get to the next rate case and the company will say, well, I know you approved these before, but there were reasons we didn't get them done, and now we're going to do them. And it shouldn't take 6 years to build or rehab or replace a couple of wells. So,
Well, that's when I'm sitting up to saying I want documentation on it.
Yeah.
Because what we're going through, people need to know that we are trying to do our best and we're trying to cooperate, and there's no cooperation there from management. You know, I don't blame the workers on the ground. I blame that next hierarchy up there and that next one below that for not getting this done. But I hope we are documenting all this, and I hope I'm going to be able to read about all this documentation that we are doing. Okay, there's no more questions. Go ahead, Director Paul.
I just want to agree with what you just said and what Mayor Oglesby just said. And just to add that it seems very imprudent when you have an existing resource that's built. And it makes sense to use that optimally. I mean, we need new resources, but new resources cost way more than making the best possible use of what you already have. So that should be a priority, to maximize what you already have built. And also these delays in building the redundancy that Dave has explained is needed. You know, all these delays make all those things much more expensive when you do finally build them, right? So
Well,
that's not very, it seems like altogether it makes things less reliable and more expensive.
yeah, and you know, luckily Pierce got fixed, you know, after a lengthy period of time, but it was, you know, still within the same season. But in many respects, when you delay redundant projects, you know, a well, but then another well starts to go in decline, and you know, next year it's at 60% of where it was, and the next year it's at 40%, and then it's down at 30%. Then when the redundant well finally gets built, it's not really redundant because you've now gone through losing another well. And so you want to have redundancy when it's redundant, not when it's a replacement. And so we see things like that. But I should say that when we see a really rainy season like this and we didn't maximize it, it actually diminishes the value of the project on a long-term supply basis. Because when we count 1,300 acre feet from ASR, that's not on an annual rain in, water out. That's an average yield over an extended period of time. So when you can bank 2,800 acre feet, if you only need 1,300, well, you've just banked 1,500. And so you're supposed to bank it when, you know, I mean, everybody knows this, you know, save it when you got it and then use it when you need it. And that's the way that these kind of conjunctive use systems are supposed to work. And then they produce an average yield. And so if we're not successful at maximizing it, then you got to rethink, well, do I need to lower the average yield simply because of these constraints that seemingly won't go away, when all of the predictive modeling was done as if the constraints didn't exist? You had all your well capacity in Carmel Valley, and you had all your injection capacity in the Seaside Basin. So if it goes on and on, you know, basically you're saying they're not supporting this one water supply project at the level it should be supported. Do we have to change our assumptions about it? But you know, theoretically shouldn't have to change your assumptions about it because these constraints can be addressed.
Okay. Thank you, General Manager. Before we move on, I'm going to open it up to the public for an update on Pure Water Monterey projects and the review of ASR before we move on. Anyone in the public?
Yeah, there is a hand raised.
Okay.
Thank you. Thank you, Sarah. Thank you, everybody. John Tilley, John Tilley. So I think a lot of us recall a few years back when the redundancy was being proposed, and that is the pipeline along Imjin Road, General Jim Moore Road. And I distinctly recall the chairman, Molly Evans of the Water District, ridiculing, mocking Cal-Am for wanting to build a redundant line, which was useful for ASR. It's easy to criticize, or it's super easy to criticize, especially, Cal-Am or anybody who's in the responsibility of providing utilities to the community. Mistakes are going to be made, but I'll tell you, it's great to hear about the cooperation between the district and Cal-Am at the functional level versus, let's say, the legal level. It's been ongoing for years that cooperation has existed, and I'm really, really grateful for both sides to operate in that manner. But my comments really, the reason I rose my hand was around the source waters for the expansion of Pure Water Monterey, for Pure Water Monterey in general. I've, like all of you, have looked at this for years, and I am completely unconvinced that the water rights exist for the expansion. Not to say they don't. I'm not convinced that they do. And really, if you had to ask me right now if I think that they do or don't exist, my response would be they don't. I think there needs to be a healthy amount of skepticism. The amount of criticism, let's just say, the amount of criticism you're willing to put on to Cal-Am for how they operate, for the public's benefit, you ought to have that same sort of skepticism when you look at the source waters for the expansion, because it is a very risky project. Tens of millions of dollars, the health of this community are being put at stake by claiming that the expansion is going to be sufficient to supply water for 30 years for our community. Again, I've looked at this for years, and I think that is an inaccurate statement. And I think that your skepticism should be, as public officials, very high on whether that is the right thing to do or not, and whether it's going to be successful or not. Because again, as a ratepayer, I would hate to be paying for empty air because we built a project that didn't have the source waters to supply it. And at this point, I really think that if it is built, there's going to come a time when we're going to be very, very disappointed in the results and the expense of the project. And I think if you couple that with the distinct potential of Measure J failing, you are saddling this community with some pretty darn big bills that don't produce water. Thank you very much. Those are my comments.
Thank you. Anyone else?
It's 1 minute.
Yeah, I don't see any.
No, I see no raised hands.
Okay, just in closing on these two issues before we go back to that one on source water for a minute. Hey, I want to thank Monterey Warm Water Recycle Water Committee and their full board for all the work they have done on the expansion. They are moving that along. They're doing a great job. Every meeting, they got something on it, they're approving something, and then the full board is approving something. The last one, our own director made a motion for consent that had about 5 items on there about the expansion, Director Oglesby, to move that along. So I'm appreciative of all the hard work they doing over there. And I think Mike was on here. Please relay that to the full board and everyone from us, the Water Management District. And that's
We
So-
do have another hand that came up, Melody Chrislock. Sarah, if you want to free her up, and JT is done.
okay.
Okay. Sorry, I'm having issues getting my screen back.
Oh yeah, I see that. It's a nice screensaver though. Are you able to see the attendees list, or is that not?
Yeah, I'm not, oh, hold on 1 minute, Dave, sorry.
Yeah. There we go.
Okay, Melody, when you're ready.
Melody Chrislock. Thanks. I'm not sure the lower hand, raise hand button was working. I just want to say how impressed I am by the responsible management of our water system of both MPWMD and Monterey One. I have every confidence that what they are telling us is the truth. And I don't know why John Tilley continues to be the sky is falling guy, but I don't think the sky is going to fall here. So I have a question about, so I have a couple questions about what General Manager was saying. So, okay, do I understand correctly, the Carmel Valley Pump Station and Forest Lake Pump Station will no longer be limitations? They are now not going to be constraints. But wasn't the public sold on the Monterey pipeline by saying that it would be improve ASR? Wasn't that, am I not remembering that correctly? And then what is CalAm doing to, are they starting? I mean, these extraction wells in the Seaside Basin are badly needed. Are they building anything? Are they working on them? Are they just sitting on their thumbs again? I mean, do you know what's going on there? And is there any more redundancy being on the lower, Carmel Valley pumps so that, I mean, it looks like this next year is going to be another wet year. And, how much of the constraints can be eliminated that CalAm is willing to address, and how much are they just going to ignore again, I guess is my question. Thank you.
Thank you.
Great. And Sarah, let's send JT and Melody back to their attendee set, although they looks like they still are, but they're on our presenter screen. Yeah, if I could, JT, John Tilley, opened up really agenda item
I think it's 3, ain't it?
3, which we're deferring for a later meeting. So we will actually address that issue. The short answer is, well, first of all, let me just comment that the new Carmel River Dam never delivered a drop of water, but the ratepayers paid for it. The Coastal Water Project, which was a desalination plant, never delivered a drop of water, but the ratepayers paid for it. The Regional Desalination Project never delivered a drop of water, but the ratepayers paid for it. I'm now into about $60+ million, just over 3 projects that never delivered a drop of water, but the ratepayers paid for it. So it's a nice warning that John Tilley has given us about being concerned about that, but it would not be precedent setting. But I, for one, am entirely confident because I get to have conversations with my counterpart, Paul Shudo, where I say, if you can't deliver on the expansion, I can't deliver the water, I get sued by CalAm, and then I sue you. So I'm coming for you, right? So you're highly confident you have the water. And the answer is always yes. The charts have been shown to me multiple times. The reason I took that off this agenda is I want to present to you a very good answer. I think the only place where we've not fully shown how better it can work is when the expansion comes online and it delivers 2,225, 250 acre feet. And we only need about, let's say 1,200 of supply to get to all that we need. And that includes both ASR and the expansion. So if ASR is working really well, we've got 1,300, which means we've got 2,250 of new water from the expansion for which we don't have any demand. We'll have annual demand increases, maybe 30 acre feet a year, maybe 50, but it's going to take a very long time to have demand ascend to the level needed to use all of the expansion. So we're going to bank that water. Well, if you put that water in the ground for 5 years, Now you've got 5,000, 6,000, 7,000 acre feet of water in reserve. And so now you're drought resistant. And so if pure water Monterey expansion is less drought resistant than pure water Monterey base, which I think it is a little bit, it's going to rely on some stored water in multiple drought years. But we have the stored water to make it happen. So you have to look at pure water Monterey expansion in two lights. One is the source water to produce the 2250 every year. And then if you have multiple drought years, and so let's say it's your third drought year or your fourth drought year, where it calls into question whether you have that source water. Well, do you have the drought reserve built up in the ground, and the combination of those two still carry the day? And so these are things that, you know, they're poorly understood by, you know, a member of the public, you know, sometimes poorly understood by us on the inside, but we're trying to put that story better together for you, because I'm kind of tired of hearing about it. You know, I did run into the mayor of Salinas yesterday at a 4th of July event, and we kind of joked a little bit about, you know, source water and so forth. But, you know, it remains a concern and remains a question, and we will bring it back to you and address it as best we can. But Monterey One's not going to put money up and build a project unless they know they can deliver. And I trust their acumen to know what they're doing.
And I believe the boards wouldn't have been approving this to move ahead. The expansion is going to be built.
Yeah.
Well, I believe we have the water. I don't think our general manager will put us in a position of knowing there's not water there, but we're going to build something. The professionals have told us that the water is there. I don't know how many times they have told us, but we're going to move forward. Director Paul, Director Oglesby, any comments before we move on?
And yeah, Director Oglesby's got his hands up.
Go ahead, sir.
Thank you. I would just add that, you know, let me put my hand down. I think our experts are just as good as CalAM's experts, and our experts are just as good as anybody in the public, notwithstanding their backgrounds. They're telling us the possibility that water will be there. That's the answer, right? And so I don't know, you know, people, and I'm not talking about the last gentleman, I'm just talking about in general, general manager. People can continue to say what they want, but if we have experts that went to the same schools, have the same education, and they're saying this thing should work, well, then who are we as board members or a general manager to say, well, no, someone told me it wouldn't work, so we're not going to go for it. You know, so I'm agreeing with you at a certain point. People are entitled to their opinions, but we're going to take the opinions of our experts. And those same experts, if you know, a year from now or 3 years from now or whatever, they could be working for CalAM because their education is the same. So after a certain point, you know, this point about, you know, I don't believe what our experts are telling us, then you're entitled to believe that. But as an agency, we need to figure out this thing and go forward. So I just appreciate your comments and the chair's comments as we move forward.
Director Paul, go ahead.
Very well said. And if we're talking about expertise, I mean, the most expert people about this system are the people at Monterey One Water who plan and build and operate and maintain the system. They're the people who know the most about it. And I don't see any reason to doubt their assessments.
Thank you. And we're going to review this. We're going to go back over this one. It's going to come back to this committee once again when we get all the facts. And I think Director Rowley can listen to this meeting and know that we're still looking at that. These source waters. You know, I hear it every meeting, and I'm sort of like getting like the general manager. I'm tired of hearing it, and we're going to move forward. Okay, Jan, what's next?
Yeah, let me close with one last thing on the source water discussion. So on May 24th, I met with State Water Board about how they might review the cease and desist order lifting. And two things were very clear. One relates to the next agenda item, that they don't want to, they meaning state water board staff, really don't want to get into having to pick and choose whose supply and demand numbers are right and whose are wrong. They would rather that be adjudicated, if that's even the right word, at the PUC. And so Fran will talk a little bit about that under the next agenda item. But he did raise that they'll want the comfort of knowing how drought resilient or drought resistant and the pure water expansion is and ASR are. And he's heard the source water debate. And so he wants the source water issue clearly, cleanly explained with certainty. And so, you know, these are things we have to do to get ready for lifting of the CDO. So we're not taking it lightly. We're going to get the answers that everybody wants. If you don't accept the answers, then that's fine. But it's not just to report to you or report to the public. We're going to need those answers as part of our, you know, the evidence to lift the CDO. With that, the last item is the status on phase 2 of the CPUC proceeding. There has been some activity there. Fran, if you're ready to just kind of let them know the lie of the land right now.
Right. We're still waiting on responses in phase 1 as to whether Cal-Am is going to recover an additional $10 million for what had been ASR 5 and 6 and are now EW extraction wells 3 and 4. Our petition for modification is still outstanding without resolution as part of phase 1, whereby while Cal-Am have signed the amended water purchase agreement, we still expressed concerns as to whether they would move forward and build the facilities if they did not get all of the monies that they wanted. So that's related to the first comment. Are they getting the additional $10 million? Cal-Am communicated with the administrative law judge about a week ago and made it seem that, you know, everybody's ready to move forward. Even though we were ready to move forward last fall, a lot has changed since then. And so attorneys for the city of Marina Coast Water District, and MPWMD all commented to the ALJ that we felt that there needed to be resolution on these phase 1 issues, and that while we made certain determinations for an evidentiary hearing on phase 2, what the long-term water supply and demand figures would be, that those were stale numbers. We felt that it would be appropriate for additional supplemental testimony to be considered. And we're waiting for a response from the administrative law judge on all of these issues. So that's the status of where we are on phase 2 for the Pure Water Monterey expansion.
And just keep in mind, phase 2 is really the long-term supply and demand numbers. And so I think that when you look at the current push, you know, every jurisdiction right now is going through their housing element, I think, draft approvals right now with final approval and submittal to the state by December. So much of the discussion about housing is related to the discussion about water supply. And so much of it is embedded in what's our future demand, that this is, you know, it's kind of the talk of the town on a regular basis, because this, you know, 6th cycle of the regional housing needs allocation process is current right now. So we'd also like to kind of get this phase 2 going with some conclusions, so that we can take those conclusions to the state water board, as I mentioned earlier. And so we can't have much more foot dragging at the PUC on this topic. We really do need to resolve it, either to table it completely or to put it back as an active proceeding. But it doesn't help us in the community to drag it along and do nothing, because we need, either adopted answers or disputed answers, but we need answers. So
Any questions? Comments? Well, here's a comment.
Well, thank you, Fran, for that update. And for prodding the ALJ.
Director Oglesby, any comments? If none, Fran, I want you to continue to prod them. There's no need of us sitting around waiting on our hands for them. If they need, I hope we are getting that new information that you said together, and I hope we send it to them so they can reject it, and we can put them on the record as rejecting it. So
I was just going to say, there are procedural avenues that we could consider depending on how much time is passing by. And we will be working very closely with the general manager on the various documentation that we do have, and the impacts that it's having on the community. Yeah.
well, I hope we can put this in our closed session in July 17th, so we can start moving on. I don't believe the PUC is one of our problems. Or CUPUC is one of our problems. So we need to start moving on now. We shouldn't be sitting on our hands waiting on them to say, okay, you can bring it now. No, here it is. You reject it, and let's move on. So we can tell the public that this is why we don't need them either. Any questions? Okay, let's take it out to the public on that item. Make sure they can.
Chair Edwards, I see no raised hands.
Thank you. Jim, do we have anything else?
Well, there's an item that says suggestions for future agenda, but we can take those via email. Obviously, the fourth water will be back on the next one.
Okay, and I want to thank the 19 members of the public for being out here with us today. It's hard to get the public to really know what's going on until they start listening to our committee meetings, and they are public. So if there's no question, I'll call for adjournment.
Thank you.
Thank
Thanks
you.
to all of you.
Hey, Karen, I see you.